right, everybody, welcome back to WhiteFlag Warriors Podcast. My name is Johnny McCoy, the CEO and founder of the WhiteFlag Company, and our biggest staple is our app. It's a platform where you're instantly and anonymously connecting with somebody else who's going through the same mental health issues, struggles, and challenges as you are. And if you listen to any of the podcast episodes that we've recorded so far, you'll know we created this platform based on what we, not only as, human beings who are, professionals in our lives, as a lawyer, we have a couple of doctors, we have some tech experts, but all of us in our own individual lives were suffering from mental health issues. And so we created what we needed. And to find out when I started looking 6 or 7 years ago before my suicide attempt, that there was just no way to instantly find somebody else who was going through the same things as you. It just didn't make sense. And I spent, months on months, like trying to find, there must be a company, there must be a way, and there wasn't. So we built it, and that's what WhiteFlag is today. It's just a free, anonymous place for you to find somebody else who's going through the same things as you or has been through the same things as you. So if you haven't yet, check out our app and some of our other podcast episodes. We like to talk to people who are in the mental health space, who have gone through mental health issues, struggles, and challenges. And today we have the wonderful guest on, Ashley. Her last name is the same as my wife's Brazilian last name, so we're going to call her Ashley Pereira. Did I get that right? Pereira. If you call her in Brazilian, which my wife is, it's Ashley Pereira. So that's for those of you who heard me talk about my wife, that's actually my wife's maiden name, and I love it. And so I think Ashley's automatically cooler now because she's in our family, the Pereira family.
I've never been in the cool club before. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, right. You guys out there, Ashley has her own podcast. She is a woman's empowerment coach. She's a trauma survivor. She's famous on LinkedIn. I mean, this individual, she's exactly what we look for when we try to get the word out about mental health and influential people in the mental health space. And so just overjoyed to have her on today. Ashley, thank you for being here. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm so good. I'm so honored, honestly, to connect with you guys. When I originally found you guys, I messaged you immediately. I think I sent you like a voice message and I was like, how do I get involved with you? I love everything you're doing.
Yes. Well, don't worry. The voice message thing is a Brazilian thing as well. My mother-in-law, she will literally send like 15 voice messages in a row, and they all are linking together, and then she'll just go off on tangents. But I guess it's more efficient that way. But no, I appreciate it. It's how I do in my family, and since you're part of my family, I thought it was awesome. And then I looked you up, and I was like, man, she's incredible. Her network and the people who follow her are exactly the type of people who we're trying to get the word out about what we're doing too. Just to see, kind of the success that you've had in your space after you've overcome, kind of what you went through. It's like-minded individuals, I guess you could say. We always recognize each other, people who have gone through and been through an immense amount of trauma, or even just a little bit of trauma, just based on, your predisposition to how you're going to be able to handle that. And Ashley is no different. And on this podcast, Ashley, I know that you're used to talking about uplifting and empowering things, but on here, our listeners and our viewers, they like the real talk. So I'm going to ask you to tell me, I'm sure you've talked about it in your stuff before, but, let's start about the beginning of your mental health journey. Mine started way before I was born. My great-grandfather took his own life, and my dad found him and stayed with him in the room. He was 12. And then never talked about it at the funeral. Everybody said they had a heart attack. He told my mom one time. She basically said, I've been through more. And he never talked about it again. And even after my suicide attempt, never told me about it. And so that's the beginning of my journey. Is like the reason I say that is because it's so far back. So I want you to go as far back as you can. When does your mental health journey start?
Yeah, I mean, it's a generational trauma. And these are discussions, honestly, that I'm used to having. I just talk about it in a way that it's inviting. because these taboo topics, people are so afraid to discuss them because of the emotions that it evokes in their own life. And I've just found a way to do it that it makes it a little bit easier to approach. Me personally, I mean, I've had a lot of suicide attempts. As a child, just after my 9th birthday, I began experiencing child sexual abuse in my home. And that lasted for 6 years until I was able to physically fight back.
Oh, wow.
And then physical abuse started. And I had to deal with that for several years. And all during that time, I was pretty suicidal as a child, right? Doing things to just like fall asleep, get through the moments. I took a lot of my emotions out in music, which like I grew up doing competitive singing. And
oh, really?
looking back on it, I'm like I look at the music that I sang, I'm like, how did someone not catch something?
Wow.
When I only sang about suicide. I only sang about like death and really morbid things for a 15-year-old. But mine for sure is generational trauma. And that's the thing that I think that most of us now are really starting to discover, is that it does not start with us. The healing starts with us, but the trauma did not start with us. It's something that's been passed down through at least one generation into our parents, probably longer than that, because things like trauma or abuse, or having the desire to end your life and commit suicide, these are things that are oftentimes, they come from learned behavior, unfortunately, and it becomes the norm. So I know for my family, I found out a lot of things as an adult when I finally had the chance to really approach my abuser in a public eye.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, it was a really interesting experience for me, especially long after my abuse ended. But through that process, I found out a lot about my family history, and that this type of abuse had become quote unquote normal for generations. And that, and especially right, child sexual abuse, most of the time it is a learned behavior. It is passed down through family. So I for sure know it went back at least 2 generations from the stories that I heard, and I definitely decided it's going to stop with me.
Great.
So while I can't help how I came into my trauma, I can help how I help it to like leave my family. And unfortunately, I never actually dealt with my experience head on. I was shied away from doing that. I was told to be quiet as a child. I was told not to tell anyone. There were adults who are, police officers and school counselors and other therapists who did approach me and ask me to share because they did catch things. And because I was told not to tell, I always kept my mouth shut. I endured a lot of abuse in a lot of different ways. And that carried into adulthood, where I still continue to never tell anyone and push it down, compartmentalize. You think you've got this thing under control and that you could just move on with your life. But it manifested in a lot of other ways. So even though as an adult, I had really successful business, I had a really successful career, very toxic relationships, very toxic friendships, my personal life was disgusting, ugly, a continuation of my childhood. My career was so successful, and on the outside, everyone was like, "Oh, she's got it together. She's great. How does she do it all?" And I didn't know at the time that it was a trauma response.
Sounds familiar.
And it 8 years ago for me, it was actually June 28th of 2015 was my last and only adult attempt to commit suicide. And I was actually met by my ex, my boyfriend at the time. He walked in the middle of my attempt and basically gave me an option, like either you're committed and I call the police, or you call someone you trust and you figure it out. You're not allowed back in this house until you take care of yourself. So that was the beginning of my active trauma healing journey, was 8 years ago.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I have so many questions. My trauma journey started in August of or July of 2018, and so you're 3 years ahead of me there. But yeah, mine was a significant other. It was I can't believe that. I mean, my wife, she got here from Brazil and saw how I was living. I mean, my house was full. It wasn't full of renters. It was full of my boy. I mean, I had females living there too. I was an attorney, practiced the law at a high level, winning every case. So that you're right, it is a trauma response. Because I was dying inside. I mean, I was on 6 milligrams of Xanax a day. And that my main issues now that I battle with are still with the Xanax protracted withdrawal, which a lot of people don't realize. But yeah, I'm 5 years later and I still deal with withdrawal issues from Xanax. Yeah. But I have so many questions. So trauma inside the family, at meaning somebody within the household or within the family, was your abuser and was toxic to you. I still suffer with losing my family for talking about what took place in my childhood. I haven't talked to my dad since I did the podcast that talks about his arrest for hitting my mom. My mom still talks to me, but barely, because I said that she's still an addict, because she is. I mean, she is on Xanax, and she swears that, because she's not drunk on alcohol, that she's sober. And so it's been difficult, but I had to choose my healing journey. And I feel great. Once people understood what I went through, they kind of understood me more, and then they kind of gave me a space. So what was your experience? I mean, that is way more intense than, me saying I saw my dad get arrested, because it's not like something he can deny. He just hated me for telling the world about it. So what was the response from your crew?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm right. I'm giving you a smile response right now.
Yeah.
I can relate to that experience. At this point in time, I have absolutely zero relationship with anyone in my family. Except
we're best friends now.
Yeah, trauma bonding.
Yeah.
I have one aunt and uncle that I speak to. And my aunt she married into the family, and she was a genuine godsend.
Oh, that's great.
She was the only person that I really trusted to be at the court trials that I had to go through.
You went to court.
I was 21.
Oh my God, we didn't get to this part yet. Well, we will.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And it was, and I was 21, and this is my first time publicly speaking about it. So my abuse had already been over for 6 years. I'd never told anyone. It was still kept very hush hush. But because I had the opportunity to, and I'm not going to divulge into that opportunity about like the why, but because I had the opportunity to, prosecute my abuser, it definitely caused a whirlwind in my family, the one that told me to be quiet in the first place. But my aunt, she married into our family when I was very, very young. She's always been so supportive, so incredible. She was one of the first people that I called when I found out that we were going to be going to court, after a really long time. Like, it just lots of drama. He went on the run, and he was hiding from the federal police, and it was something out of a Lifetime show.
God, you have complex PTSD.
I do. I was diagnosed 8 years ago with it. Sure. Yeah. Thank God for that diagnosis, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was the first person I called, and I was like, this is what I went through, and these are the things that I've experienced, and I want you to be there. I trust you, and I want you in the courtroom so that I can look at you. And I understand these things are going to be hard for you to listen, but I need a safe space because this is my first time doing this, and I just need someone there to comfort me. And she showed up, and she showed up for me every single day since. And she was there through my baptism 7 years ago, and she came and traveled 20 hours just to see me get baptized. And she's absolutely incredible. And my children know her, and anyone who I love hears about her. She's the only family member I still speak to. But it's the same thing with my family, and this comes from shame. right? This is why we're quiet in the first place, why we internalize a lot of things in the first place as individuals who have experiences because of shame. But our family members or our friends who also know about them, they feel shameful just by association. And when you're not given a supportive environment in the first place to have a safe space to open up, it causes havoc to just completely break out. And when I first came out about my abuse publicly, a lot made sense to my childhood friends. They were like, no wonder why this. No wonder why you never wanted me to leave your house, or no wonder why you always wanted to stay at mine, or right. Like there was just all of these like connections finally making sense to them. And my family was, I went for a really rough time. They stopped talking to me, and it was hard because I didn't know at that point in time to disconnect from toxicity, regardless of who it was, because we're taught blood's thicker than water, right?
Right.
Growing up, you always hear that.
Family. My dad used to say, family's all you have. And I believed it. And if that was true, I'd be screwed. And so would you. If family's all you have, we'd be screwed.
Exactly. And so like for the longest time, and I followed this thing of like, okay, they're family. Like I must, and like the problem must be me. And right, I was still blaming myself. I hadn't started healing yet. So I was giving in to these ideals that I was the problem.
Yeah, and you just want attention, and everybody else has been through worse and all that good stuff.
Yeah. But when I decided to, my testimony of like finding Jesus and finding God is just, it's so powerful. And when I went through that process of hearing God and just the way that I got to my baptism 7 years ago, I mean, there was literally just signs everywhere. Like I'd ask a question or I'd beg for something and it would just show up. And I was like, all right, well, I need to be a Christian and let me go this way. When I got baptized, the way that my church at the time chose to help people share their testimonies was you did a 5-minute video testimony that was broadcasted to thousands of members online and in church. And I chose to share my story of abuse.
Wow.
And because I didn't see that from previous members. So I shared my story of abuse. And when that came out, I went through this entire process all over again with my family, who was unsupportive, and realized, okay, I'm a year into my healing now. So I have the tools to stand up for myself, and I'm going to be sure to like do what I need to through this whole process. And I cut ties with my family. But I've never felt healthier.
Yeah.
I've never had this like higher sense of confidence and health since making that decision around 7 years ago when I got baptized. It's hard. Healing is very challenging. Adulthood is challenging in the first place.
No, I can relate so much to that. I mean, how you were able to come out though and, give your testimony in front of a big group of people. And I mean, that takes courage. That takes real courage, especially when you don't have your family around you. I know that you say you do with your aunt, but that's minimal support. I know she's given you unbelievable support and has been there the whole time, but we're not born to live with the love of one person that we call family. I mean, you're born with multiple parents and grandparents and all that. And, I mean, to hear, that you've gone through that without them around you, and that you chose to be the cycle breaker, it's unbelievably encouraging. And, I mean, it's inspiring really, and a lot of people, a lot of people don't realize that typically what happens is you just grow up and you hide your shame and the abuse by doing drugs, and you're the bad person. You're the one on the street corner who's asking for change. That's the normal course for somebody who's gone through what you went through. And
it is.
Yeah. And, it just takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength, and I even say a little bit of luck and, faith to get to the point where you go from that amount of trauma and abuse to being who you are today, and not being somebody who just, used substances or, people and relationships to kind of quiet down the storm. And for me, unfortunately, I was born with generalized anxiety disorder. My mom she was abused in her house as well, never spoke about it, still to this day. I speak about it though on her behalf. And my dad, my dad is clearly diagnosable for several things. He's never been to anybody other than one doctor that he trusts. He's an old South guy and, doesn't talk about it. He never would talk about anything. My PTSD is from being falsely arrested and witnessing somebody, take their life in jail. And, it would have been nice if my dad during the 5-year lawsuit would have been like, I've seen somebody who was dead from a suicide. That would have been great, unfortunate for both of us, but it would have been an unbelievably healthy experience for me to have just one person understand me. Instead, they told me that if I filed the lawsuit against my wrongdoers, against the police and against the prosecutors, that I was no longer a member of the family. And he meant it. And they actually pulled them in to depose them. I mean, I can't help that shit. And so they deposed my mom and said she was an alcoholic. And that was the reason that I was a drunk, and that my dad was, they brought up his abusive past and said that I'm an abuser because of that. They tried to say that I assaulted the cop, and they were trying to do anything they could to say that. And what they did was they attacked my family thinking that we were close, and it brought us closer because we were like, it got to the point where it was like the only time that they rallied around me was when they were taking arrows. Then of course it went away after, my case settled and everything. But I mean, for me, I was diagnosed with mental health issues like generalized anxiety disorder, depression, agoraphobia, PTSD, complex PTSD, and then I got put on Xanax. And so my issues were chemical in my brain. And so after my attempt, after I went into treatment, after I started my healing journey, after I found out about all the healthy other stuff, I was still losing my mind, literally. And I can say it now. I was practicing law at a high level. You would not have thought that I was anything other than a major success. So I tell people all the time that I'm currently on antipsychotics because it's important for people to know. And I almost died not believing that, if I got on a medication with that, I mean, it's the highest stigma that you can be on as far as medication goes. Yeah. Because you're psychotic unless you're on antipsychotics. And then if they work, you're screwed. But they work really, really well for me. And so, I did everything that I possibly could to find a resolution, to find, what you found in your faith. And I got lucky at the last minute. At the last thing I tried, I tried everything. I tried ketamine, mushrooms, EMDR, ECT, brain waves. Every possible thing you can imagine. And it was I was gone, and I was called my psychiatrist, who had been telling me, we need to put you on antipsychotics. I think it'll help. I'm going, my anxiety, I don't need bipolar, but they all, they're used for these mood things. And so, and so it's me and my Seroquel and my wife, at this point. So it's you and your faith and your aunt, and that's, it's a pretty incredible, that we have so much things in common when it comes to, speaking out and starting to, kind of step away from that generational trauma. But I hope that they heal. I really worry about my family a lot. I think about them all the time. I really hope that, I've given up on them, like looking at me and being like, well, maybe I should get a therapist. Maybe I should take medication. Maybe I should talk about it. And, I just, my little brother's doing really well. He's a high school football coach and a special ed teacher, and he's in therapy and working the program and all that. So I have my aunt, but it's my brother instead. So
yeah. But that's amazing. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to realize as adults, right? Whether you identify with mental health challenges or trauma or triggers or not, we have to identify as adults is that as we get older, there's less people that are supportive in our life anyway. There's
Right.
typically only one or two. And I feel very lucky to have my aunt. And
Yes.
especially looking at in hindsight, I know she was a godsend for me. She is the one healthy thing that came out of my family besides my own children that I now have. And I feel very blessed to have that because I have open conversations with her. And there's not a lot of people that we can have that with, period, who are open to listening and being unbiased and objective and really listening to whatever's coming out of our mouth or out of our mind. And like the things that I've told her, good Lord, like I sounded super crazy.
Yeah, but they're not going to kick in the door because your aunt,
Yeah.
she knows.
I have, by choosing to speak out, and this is not for everyone, right? I am very public about my experiences because, like you, I searched for others who could provide me the solutions that I needed, but couldn't find them because of that thing called shame that we're taught through society of like, oh, keep your stuff to yourself. And that's great. It worked for prior generations. It does not work for us in the world today.
Yeah.
But by sharing my story, now I have a really good support system. The one that I wish I had growing up, but I'm super proud and honored to have it now. I have incredible children. I have my aunt. I have a super supportive partner. I have incredible, amazing people that I've met through LinkedIn. I talk about all of my mental health stuff on LinkedIn.
That's awesome.
All places. Late April of 2022, I woke up one day on a Tuesday and I was like, I'm going to share about my child sexual abuse on LinkedIn today. And I did. And it got like 150,000 worldwide hits and thousands of people within like 2 days. And it was thousands of people that were flooding my inbox, my comments, reaching out to me, scheduling one-on-ones with me, wanting to share their story because they had never told a soul in their life.
Wow.
Just in my content in the last, since April of 2022, I think I've reached like 1.7 million people just from my story alone. And I've met with hundreds of trauma survivors, people who experience triggers. I met with people who have been diagnosed with bipolar and depression and anxiety and all sorts of things that they've never publicly talked about. And there's so much power in community, in sharing with each other. And if you're not that person to feel the urge to share it publicly, or that's totally okay, right? If you can find one person, even through an app like WhiteFlag,
that's right,
to be able to share your story, the amount of weight that's lifted off of your shoulders and the empowerment that you get behind just finally getting that out off of your chest. If you cannot speak to a therapist or you feel like I just need to tell a normal person, there's so much empowerment in being able to do that and going about a different way of living your everyday life. I have gotten so many great things out of sharing my story. And I just I want to do it all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right on. And what's funny is, I guess, particularly for men, we would get like my dad, like, what the hell? Why would I tell what is that going to do? Like people, it's hard to explain what nature has put inside of our bodies and inside of our minds. Like for instance, the emotion of love. Like, how the hell do I explain that? Well, you meet somebody, you have similar, and then you start to feel this weird bond, and then all of a sudden you die for them and they'll die for you. And then you're like, well, so guess what? You just have to experience it, and then you understand it. But when it comes to support, particularly peer support or connecting with somebody who understands you, traditionally in men are like, well, what the hell is that going to do? Why would I talk about what I'm going through? Like, what am I, my dad? So I'm just quoting my dad here. What am I, baby? I'm going to go talk about what my dad did to me and my mom did to me. Like, oh, I'm going to cry about it. And then you sit there and you go, yeah, I know. It sounds So all this. So when you say shame, what you're really saying is the stigma, and all of this is the stigma, and it rolls off the tongue like, oh my God, end the stigma. Everybody says it, but if we could truly end the stigma, then I would have taken my medication earlier. My dad would already be healthy, and 70% of the male population who experiences mental health issues wouldn't actually attempt suicide.
Yep.
And I talk about the male issue with it, because when I was looking for a online support group or whatever, all of them out there were, they were not for me. They had hearts and patronizing language, and like my wife loves all that stuff, encouraging, but not me, not my roommate who did 5 tours. We just need real, raw, honest conversation and connection. And so that's why White Flag is just like no bullshit. There's no hearts, there's no likes, there's no retweets. There's no way for you to get any sort of self-gratification other than helping somebody.
I love
And
that.
yeah, and it has been, the most unbelievable thing ever, because of course, we have a lot of LGBTQ plus, we have a lot of females on there, but yeah, somehow, some way we've been able to pull a good, nexus of men on there as well. And, it's not because, you go to therapy and then you get on White Flag. A lot of people, that's the case. But for many people on the app who have never even thought about starting their mental health journey, you get on there and you're like, I don't need to get on this. I just saw Ashley talking about it. I heard, this veteran talking about it. So I'm just going to download it. And then you get on there and then you could just start reading other people's profiles. The reason that we did that way is so that you could personally learn from somebody else what the terms are, what the issues are. Like you hear from Ashley, you get sexually abused and then you have complex PTSD. So you got the sexual abuse part. I'm talking to people who are listening. You just haven't got to the part where you understand what the hell happened to you. Where you understand what the hell your diagnosis could or should be. And I'm going to be honest, you don't go into a therapist's office or a psychiatrist's office and them just hear your story and then start diagnosing you. You have to say, I have looked up this. I have seen these symptoms. Do you think that this is something? That's what I did the whole time.
Yeah.
I was like, listen, like I think I'm still going through withdrawal symptoms. Here's the Ashton manual that talks about benzos. And then my psychiatrist, it's like revered and has all these awards, goes, oh yeah, you should probably be taking this for your withdrawal symptom. So you have to articulate, and that's the worst part about it, is you have to advocate for yourself when you're sick. And you're the person who's least equipped and most equipped to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you're depressed, like you can't even, honestly, if you're truly depressed, you cannot even get out of bed and brush your teeth, let alone Google what the hell depression is and where a psychiatrist is. But guess what? Nobody else can do it for you unless you live with a therapist or you live with Ashley or one of Ashley's kids or Johnny's kids. And we know so much about it that we're like, you think this is
too much,
which is just like totally unheard of. One out of every 50 parents maybe will understand, what they're looking at. It's not laziness. It's this person is having a chemical imbalance in their brain to something from outside factor that's taking place. But when I created White Flag, I had not even really found a good tribe of people, because I'm a lawyer. Nobody gives a shit if you're in pain and you're a lawyer. Trust me. I was high profile. I was on the Today Show and, news articles and stuff. And I won all my cases when I was sick. Literally, I won 11 felony trials in a row, and I've never filed a frivolous lawsuit.
That's the psychosis.
Yeah, that's it. That's the psychosis, right? And it was all being managed with Xanax and with whatever else alcohol I was consuming, it was kind of keeping it down low. But, the reality of the situation is that if I would have found another lawyer who was hiding what they were going through, because I was afraid the bar was going to suspend me and all this, or if I would have found somebody else who witnessed a suicide, or maybe somebody who was falsely arrested. You know how hard it is to find somebody who's falsely arrested, who's willing to talk about it in the South? Everybody's just like, oh yeah, right. What did you say? What did you do to make them, beat you unconscious on the street corner? And so I was totally alone. And the first time I ever found anybody who understood me was on the app that I built and created. And so,
And it's, I now, as of recently, just the last couple of months, my target avatar, as far as who I market to, the general content that I share on LinkedIn, and the programs that I advertise, that I teach and I coach through, is targeted towards women, entrepreneurial women and trauma survivors, or women with trauma triggers and mental health challenges. But over this last, 17 months since April of 2022, I would easily say that 70 to 80% of the individuals that I've spoken with are men. They're
Really?
high-profile men. Yes.
Oh, wow.
I've had politicians reach out to me. I've had very decorated military individuals reach out to me.
That's
I've had CEOs of very, very large companies, or executive leaders of very large companies, men who have been entrepreneurs for decades, who have had decades of trauma decades ago, or experiences decades ago, or they've been living with some sort of PTSD or other mental health obstacles for a very long time. Those are the people that, for the majority, have reached out to me, that I've spoken with, that I've done one-on-one coaching with, that I've had things like coffee chats with, that find my content very valuable. The majority of them has been men, because I know that I'm a brand strategist by nature. This is my professional job, is being in brand. I understand the psychology behind that, of approaching me, right? I'm a woman, I'm softer, I'm empathetic. I understand a different mindset of approaching me to share these things with me. Most of my business clients throughout the last 13 years that I've consulted for or coached for have been men, for the same exact reasons, because I'm empathetic and I listen differently and I look and I approach things differently. It's no different with mental health, because it's this mental health thing, whether it's business or it's with our stuff in our personal lives. It is so much easier for most men to approach a woman about it, because of the soft nature and the empathy behind what they're going to say or how they want to approach it. And I still get it all the time. Most of the men most of the people who like my content, who look at my content, who look at my profile, I look at that stuff all the time. It is some very high profile men that are following me, that are liking my content, that are in my DMs. It's not unusual, but people don't talk about it, which is the problem. We need to talk about things more and have conversations more and share more. And that's why I do. We deserve more of that.
Yeah, no, the people who I've connected with that are attorneys or that have witnessed a suicide are all females. And my entire, except for one person, my entire mental health support, my therapist, my psychiatrist, my peer support, people that I talk with, are all females, because my dad wasn't he was the quintessential Southern, on the tobacco farm, and, very strict, very stern, very mean, very quiet. We never talked about anything. So I literally would crawl to my mom and be like, is this, and I was dying of generalized anxiety disorder when I was in my before I was 10. And so she and I, we would sleep together in the same bed every night, even when I was I had two brothers, but it was always me, because I was awake every night, terrified. I had nightmares. I would scream in my sleep. I'd walk around the house beating on doors and walls while I was asleep, and nobody ever said anything. Nobody ever. And so when I got into therapy, actually, when I got into my treatment facility down in Ocala, Florida, they go through it and you take this long personality test and long tests about your life. And I got exactly. And I got the hippie therapist, and I'm going, and my roommate's making fun of me, and she's this female, and she's got butterfly things in her hair, and I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna work out. And she saved my life. She truly saved my life. And
the same therapist.
Yeah, it's hard to talk.
That was the same with me. I'm like, you're too woo for me.
Yeah.
And this woman, same with me, and she knew exactly what I needed. Yep. I was like Fort Knox going in, because I was forced into I was under suicide watch for 72 hours. And I did not have a choice to go and start my healing. Right. You have a choice to start your healing. You have a choice to start talking. even if you're forced into a situation like that. But it took me weeks. And I think it was like closer to 2 months to ever say a word. And they finally they're like, okay, you have complex PTSD. We're diagnosing you with this. I still hadn't really talked. And when I went back home, because I was sent down to Florida, I was living in Atlanta at the time. And they were like, okay, well, when you go back home, here's the person that you need to see. Because at the time there was only EMDR was still super woo. And it was they called it basically witchcraft. They're like, people look at it as witchcraft. They don't talk about it at all. So it's kind of on the low. But this is one woman in Atlanta who is known for doing EMDR. I went to her. She was I think my first time meeting her, I was like, who did they send? She's hippie. And this is not my person. I'm very type A, logical, organized, have to control everything, total trauma response. And I was like, I don't want a part of any of this. And she shared her own story. And I don't know if she normally did that or if she just recognized that, okay, this individual needs someone to relate to for the first time in her life. But she had a very similar story to me. And because she shared that, I felt so safe to open up and to really get into what I needed to through EMDR and other tools and things that she practiced with me and taught me that I still use today. I use all those things that she taught me, but it does take oftentimes, the power of relatability. That's what pulls people together. It's what helps you find community and feel safe. And even if you don't know how to communicate, just knowing that someone is there to hold you or comfort you or listen to you, that can be safety enough. And you never have to say anything. With your app, that's what I provide on my LinkedIn. I am white flag on LinkedIn, basically.
That's awesome.
Of here's my story. Even if you don't interact with me, I know you're here. I know you're showing up. I see you looking at my profile. I see you poking around. Get what you need.
That's what's important.
I hope it's helping. And some people have come to me a year later and they're like, I've been following you for a year and your content has changed my life. It's made me feel more confident in my work, in my own trauma. I've started talking to a therapist. I'm feeling confident enough to starting my own business or doing these things. I'm like, I had no idea.
Wow.
That you've been following me. Everybody needs a white flag app or a white flag person in their life because we need good examples in life.
Yeah, no, it's so difficult to, kind of quantify the feeling that you'll get when somebody says, I can relate to that. And so many, it's so hard to describe I try to look back on why would I talk about it? What was my issues? And my issues were a lot different because, being a lawyer and being in the courtroom and, having the bar looming over you, I was always afraid if anybody heard about any of this stuff that they would, take my bar number and, tell me I couldn't practice law anymore, or that they would put me in a facility involuntarily, which is where my PTSD started in the first place, from being involuntarily. So during my lawsuit, my mental health records were being, they were being shared with the state, with the police, with the prosecutor. And so I just sat there for 3 years going, no, that sounds good. And then when I went to treatment and I connected with the first person who kind of, said, wait a minute, so you've broken fingernails during your nightmare trying to dig through your wall? And I was like, I've never heard of that before. I just thought I was totally a lunatic. I thought that nobody had gone as far as I had gotten in my pain. I had thought that everybody else had already taken their life. And then I was just this guy who was just holding on too long, and then I should just go ahead and be done with it, because I'd never found anybody who discussed the same things that I was seeing and hearing and feeling. And when I look back on it, and what we do is we simplify the process of connecting somebody who's going to go, yeah, no, I get that. I went through that. I understand that. That's all we do. And when that first happens to you and you realize, oh my God, somebody else has gone through this. Somebody else has survived this. Somebody else is currently here in this dark place with me. well, somebody else was here and then they got out. Like when I started meeting people who I came off of Xanax in 23 days, which is like, no, but I hadn't been able to, I mean, I was supposed to titrate over the course of 24 months and I came off in 23 days because I was hoping it would kill me. And it almost did. It was like torture. I can't even explain it. Brain issues, traumatic brain injuries from, what I went through coming off of it that fast. But then I started meeting other people that came off it and they were like, so are you having issues with this and this sensitivity? And, and I'm going, yeah. And so, I can't explain to those of you who are out there or those of you who haven't started sharing your story yet because either A, you think it's not good enough to share or you haven't gone through enough and you're embarrassed and this is nothing compared to what other people have been through, or you've been through a lot and you think, I'm just hanging on here. Just think about this. When you are on a bus next to somebody and they, even if you don't want to talk to them and they're like, yeah, I know, where are you from? And you go, well, I'm from Dallas. And that person goes, well, I have a cousin in Dallas. Immediately, because you relate to about one teeny issue, the wall starts to come down a little bit and you start to feel more comfortable with them. And then you go from, oh, I know somebody in Dallas to what's your favorite restaurant? Then from your favorite restaurant to, oh, have you ever been to, a Cowboys game? And now all of a sudden, and eventually you have so many things in common that you think, all right, well, I'm going to throw this out there and see if this, and that's what it feels like when somebody says, no, I've been I was molested too as a child. It's like hearing that they're from Dallas and that they've been to a Cowboy, all the way down to they know that they share the most intimate thing about me. Yeah. This person is in my tribe now. Yeah. And you'll feel comfortable sharing with them. And when you do, you won't walk away going, are they going to tell anybody? Are they going to judge me? You're going to go, same to them, same to them. They're going through the same thing I am, and they're not afraid that I'm going to share it with other people and that I'm going to judge them. And so that's the best way I can describe it for people sitting there going, well, who cares if I meet somebody who knows what I've been through or, who was also arrested or sexually assaulted? Like, what is that going to do for me? If you look at how your relationships work in life in general, you'll see that common things that you have with people are the reason that your relationship is strong. And if you have the most intimate thing in common with them, they're going to be somebody who is going to lift you up in a way that your friends, your family, nobody else could. Somebody who can personally relate to your issues is the medicine. It's the gold that we mine out of each other to help each other heal.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So, where do people find you? How can they engage with you? How can more people like me? I'm definitely going to have a couple of conversations with you now that I understand that you get hit up by people like me all the time. How can people find you? How can they see what you're working on and hear more about what you have to say about this crisis?
The best place to connect with me or hear anything is LinkedIn. I live on that platform. I take advantage of every tool that LinkedIn offers on that platform. You can just look up Ashley N. Pereira and you'll find me. It says Empowering Women and Trauma Survivors right in my headline. You'll see my face. Everything is on there about mental health and it's very recognizable. And I love connecting with other people. I genuinely love it. I find true value in human-to-human connection. I offer coffee chats. I have coaching programs. I'm a business mentor. I am a mental health mentor. I truly believe in the power of connection and how life-changing it is. So if you're afraid to reach out to me, please don't be. I promise I'm very approachable and I will likely hit you up for a coffee chat if you choose to connect with me.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So are you ever going to write a book, do you think?
That's really funny. I get asked that all the time from
Same.
survivors.
Yeah.
All the time. I also get asked that from people selling books.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, that's true.
publishers.
Yeah. But
Someday.
it just seems like that's, I would read your book for sure. And it just seems like, there's just so much more. Like, we cannot get this in a podcast. Like, I could ask you so much more. I mean, I literally had to stop myself from going through, like, because being an attorney and seeing a victim on the stand in a courtroom, like, I could go a whole podcast about how that was for you. And, just being somebody in a chair who has to raise their right hand and swear that the most egregious and horrific things you're about to hear are from my soul and they're truth. And then have somebody else stand up and be like, it's not true. Like, you're making this up.
I had that experience.
Yeah, it's devastating.
We could definitely have, yeah. And then like the, the health impacts, the physical health impacts of mental health that.
Oh my God, I can't believe you brought that up.
Yeah.
I was in a wheelchair before. So I was diagnosed with peripheral neuropathy. I was in so much pain. I had Lyrica patches on me. I was prescribed painkillers.
Yeah.
I gained all this weight. I'd swollen all up, and they were all, I was getting injections and nerve blocks in the back of my head, in my full suit, in between hearings at the courthouse, in the back of my neck. And you could feel the needle going in. I mean, it was a huge needle.
Yeah. Nope.
And then, so they're like, okay, you have these like bad headaches. And then my eyes were twitching so bad that I started wearing fake glasses so that you couldn't see my eyes just like going like this. And guess what? I have Crohn's disease. So there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't go to the bathroom like 10 times. Not a day, not a single day that went by and I just thought it was normal. I mean, nobody talks about this stuff, especially in the South, and just in general. But, my anxiety would start and it would manifest itself in my stomach. And so there was no dinners. There was no, until I got on Xanax, which my mom gave me my first Xanax. And I was like, it felt like, the only way to describe it is it felt like literally like living in a cloud. It was cold. It was soft. There wasn't anybody around me. Nothing bothered me, but I was still operating. I mean, I was practicing law on 6 milligrams of Xanax, 6 little blue pills. I was withdrawing every 2 hours. So I'd have to take another one. And I wasn't slurring. I wasn't, high.
You're functioning.
I was like the rest of the world. And so when I realized that there was no end game to Xanax, like, what are you going to, like, you just keep adding to it. Yes. And so I started off with 1 and I was on 6 milligrams at the end. And my doctor looked at me and he goes, we can't go up to 7. And I was like, so then I started finding them elsewhere and, whatever I could possibly do. And eventually, I was like, okay, so I have no choice. This is, you either go through this and come off of Xanax and start your life over, or you die. And so I tried to die. And then I was like, well, they say that if you come off of Xanax, you can die. And so I had multiple seizures. I had surgery on an organ. I broke my teeth. My jaw was clenched. So I had to go like this, walking around.
Oh yeah. I have to I know where that's from.
so now we're on to your physical aspect. So I love that you brought that up, because like nobody thinks that mental health issues are physical. They have no clue that it's so physical.
They are. They really are. I had gone through multiple mini strokes, several seizures. And this is all pre CPTSD diagnosis. I had been in and out of the doctors for years because they didn't understand where these sudden seizures were coming from. I had blackouts. Like, I would be in the middle of a conversation and then all of a sudden come to in a totally different room or area and would have apparently I was functioning, but I would have no recollection of what was going on.
Is that like disassociating or whatever?
Yeah, just all of a sudden, and to me, right, I was in the middle of a conversation and then I would wake up. I didn't even have any recollection of anything in between. And it could be a half an hour later. It could be 15 minutes later. And I would be like walking in a hallway and have no idea where I was. So for a while, I had started having these like mini strokes and other kinds of seizures as well, where they were causing me to black out, pass out. I hit my head a few times, had really bad concussions where I actually lost my speech for a while. I was not permitted to drive for a while. I had to go through like mini speech therapy. I was seeing neurological doctors like every other day, and I had to get driven to go see them, and I'd spend multiple hours with them getting neurological testing done and trying all sorts of things.
Yep.
And all of my tests came back normal. No one had any idea where any of these issues were coming from. My adrenals were failing, which is a really rare and dangerous thing. Is I was borderline adrenal fatigue, and they had no clue where it came from. Because if you have that, that's one of those things like you're born with it. You don't just get it. Yeah. So it was like my cortisol levels were just so awful, but all of my tests came back normal. They had no idea like why I was having like hypoglycemic episodes and seizures and all of these things. And when I was finally diagnosed with my CPTSD, a lot of it finally made sense. Yeah. And now that like things were flowing out of me,
it's the best feeling
my health
ever.
Started coming back in, but I was right opposite of you, where you were gaining weight. I was losing weight. And I'm still recovering from that. This is probably my best year in terms of like my weight and being healthy. I've been underweight a really, really long time, and I have a really hard time even getting close to what's considered a healthy weight. Yeah. And my ribs show, and my just like my hips stick out, and my face sucks in, and any food that I eat, if I can eat it, it's just it causes a lot of other issues. Yeah. I know so many trauma survivors who have things like fibromyalgia, chronic pain. They've now been diagnosed with things like anxiety or clinical depression, and they maybe they have to go to the doctor all the time for like shots, like what you've said, or they can no longer close their hands because now they have things that are similar to other types of diseases that lie in your body. And there's so many of them who I've talked to that they're like, oh my God, this makes sense. Yep. Why I have these issues, because I've heard the same from doctors too, that they don't understand where this is coming from. They don't understand where my sudden like fibromyalgia or other types of issues. I've talked to so many trauma survivors that have experienced seizures all of a sudden. And it's because your fight or flight having to like kick in and be on all the time and constantly pushing down and suppressing your memories. It's great while you're in the trauma, or while you're in the experience, or while you're triggering something. Your body is doing what it's supposed to by protecting you from alternate things that could happen. So your body kicks in and it suppresses all of these feelings, and your adrenals kick up and you're like on this high during the experience. But what shouldn't be happening is it being on all the time.
24 hours a day, including in my sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and like, I don't even want to get started with sleep. Until recently, and I'm still a bad sleeper, but most of my abuse happened at night. So I
can't imagine.
The last 26 years of my life, I can't sleep at night. So I'm like tired during the day, and I have constant fatigue, and because I'm constantly on, my adrenals are constantly going, my fight or flight is constantly kicking in.
Locked in.
Eventually it causes other problems. And like I go to the chiropractor like every single week because my body's so tensed up all the time that it causes my jaw to lock up. It causes my spine to move, where I have to get it adjusted. I'm constantly having like shoulder issues and hip problems because even in my sleep, when I think I'm resting, I'm tensed up so much that it just causes more and more issues. Mental health is not just mental health. It's well-being.
No. Yeah. And a lot of people who, everybody, I relate to all that so much. I found out there's something called akathia or acacia or something like that. And it's like, particularly to people who are withdrawing from Xanax, and it's like these physical movements. So my feet, I'll be sleeping and my foot will literally go like this.
Yeah.
And like my toes will spread involuntarily. My toes will spread out, and it'll just go like this, and it'll just stay like that all night. So my feet is where I carry a lot of my nerve issues, and my shoulders. So when I was in treatment, I remember calling my wife on this particular day, and I was literally like laying on the ground because my shoulders had finally started to come down, and it was so painful that I couldn't like turn my head. It was almost a week that my body was sort of just like resetting. And it was one of the most unbelievable experiences to see that I was locked like this for 15 years, just locked like this. And then it started coming down, and it was so painful. It literally was like I had been locked like that for 10 years, and this is what it feels like when you do it. And I just remember, when I came home, because people are like, oh, it's just mental. No, it's incredibly physical. And especially for somebody who has PTSD with triggers that happen a lot, or anxiety like I had, I was waking up and because of your cortisol, like I love talking to you. Cortisol is like, I know all about it, and so my cortisol levels were extremely high in the morning because of my nightmares, and because as a practicing lawyer, I'd wake up with 1,000 text messages saying, I got arrested, worst night of my life. You need to help me. Where are you? Why are you out? And so I'd wake up and look at my phone.
Bring on the stress.
And so it got to the point where I would take a Xanax, and then I'd wait till it kicked in. Then I'd do my phone. They don't have that anymore. And so when I was in treatment, I would wake up and I'd be like shivering. And I would wait until I take the little, BS medication that they give you. It's like Benadryl almost. And it barely gets you to the point where you can, talk and function. But I operated like that until I got on antipsychotics.
I get that. I would go to the chiropractor, and they do, because mine, I still get it like a lot of my ribs. My ribs move a lot, and it's really, really painful.
Yeah, I bet.
So I'm constantly getting my ribs adjusted. And when I first started going, right before I started my trauma therapy, I was going to the chiropractor like every other day because my ribs were constantly moving. And your ribs are like one area in your body. If you have to get them adjusted, it impacts your entire nervous system, because your spine's hooked up there. All of your major nerves go through that area, and your major organs are underneath. So I would get my adjustments on my ribs, and my entire body would go into shock, the same way that you just experienced with like having shivers. And I would go through that during every adjustment, where I'd have to just sit there on a table for like an hour afterwards to recover from a simple adjustment, because it just put such a shock on my nervous system and put me into just like hyper intensive mode where my body didn't know how to respond. It's such a like a serious thing, the way that your mind and body is connected in terms of like your mental and physical well-being. I have an entire episode on one of my podcasts literally titled "The Powerful Connection Between Mind and Body," talking about this exact thing, because people don't talk about it enough.
Where do we find your podcast?
That podcast is called The Worthy Woman, and you can find it on Spotify.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's just so incredible, to hear somebody who understands, because guess what, Ashley, you did nothing to deserve having to deal with all this shit. Like, you were just a little girl. You were just born. That's it. Yep. And, a lot of people think, like I did, that I deserve to be sick because, I was coping, and I was, going out every night and ruining relationships and friendships. And so when I was in pain, I was kind of like, this is what you did to other people. You hurt other people. And just like your dad said, you hurt him, and what mom says, you deserve this. You're arrogant, loud, and all this other stuff that people said. But the truth is, like, none of us deserve any of this shit. And to hear all that you've been through, from being a little girl, innocent you're still innocent, obviously, but being a little girl, you did nothing to nobody, and then you tried to do the right thing, and the right thing is what your parents and your family tells you. So you stayed quiet.
Yep.
And they were, intentional.
Listen to my podcast.
No. But they
literally, I've said these words.
and you, I just relate to a lot of it, and I appreciate you being so open. And no wonder a lot of people who are in my position, of having multiple employees and people you take care of. And it's hard. It's hard because it's hard to find somebody who, that you feel comfortable. Like, what do I got to complain about? I got this company and this beautiful wife and this wonderful relationship with her. And the truth of the matter is, that type of thinking is what really gets people into trouble.
Yeah.
And so I encourage everybody out there to find Ashley or find somebody like her. And in the meantime, get on WhiteFlag and you can find somebody who's going through the same things just like you are. And you don't even have to tell them your story. You can just ask them about theirs and see how amazing it is for them. And the best part about this whole thing is whether you're giving support, which is listening and being there and sharing a little bit about you, or getting support, which is connecting with somebody and hearing them and, learning what they have to say about you. But most importantly, you're telling your story and kind of unpacking it and taking this load off of you. You're going to feel better. And it's the people who are there for somebody else while the other person is there for them that leave feeling like this chemical reaction. It's almost like somebody put a shot in your arm, and it's nature, and it's what we were programmed before we arrived on this planet. Whoever you believe in, whatever your faith is, you can't deny that being there for somebody feels good, and then telling somebody how you feel and what you're going through also feels just as good, if not better. And so all we are doing is exploiting nature and what's inside of you on WhiteFlag. We're making it easy for you to be there for somebody. We're making it easy for you to find somebody who makes you feel comfortable enough to talk. And, join us on WhiteFlag. I'm on there. Join Ashley on LinkedIn, on her podcast, reach out to her, interact with her. I know I sure will. You guys will see me start to, try to get my coffee session with her in now that she's promised that it'll happen. And so, thanks for tuning into this podcast. It's been amazing. Just like I thought it would be. Ashley Pereira, as she likes to be called. And for those of you who know my wife, Sia Pereira. So we're family. Me and Ashley are family actually now. So she just felt to have her. You don't have just your aunt anymore, and I don't have just my little brother. We have each other. So
yeah, we have the Pinedas.
Yeah, we're Pineda family, and so. But seriously, this was an amazing episode. I always feel like good after I just feel better, so like this.
Same.
My crew is always like, are you okay? Because it's in the beginning, it was really hard for me to do these podcasts, but now like, I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's like, it's almost like it's scheduled therapy, scheduled peer support. Yeah, and
that's why I started mine.
Yeah.
It's therapy for me.
Yeah, exactly. And it truly is. And I can't thank you enough, not only for coming on the podcast, but for reaching out to me. Like, I know that it's hard to believe, but when people like you believe in me and believe in what we're doing, it really makes a huge impact. And for you to reach out the way that you did and be so supportive and understand what we're doing, like for somebody like you who understands the mental health crises firsthand, and then you understand ways to combat it, for somebody like you to reach out and say, you guys are doing it the right way. You guys are doing the right thing, and you're going to help people, and you already are. It just means the world to me. I read the reviews all the time, but this one hit a little bit closer to home to me.
Thanks. I've enjoyed it.
I really, really appreciate it, Ashley. Thank you so much for coming on. For those of you who are listening, please share the episode with your friend. Follow us on all our social media. Go follow Ashley, send her a message, and make sure you say, I listened to your podcast. It made a difference, so that Ashley will know, just how important what she's saying. I mean, she knows, but the fact that she came on here and did it, please reach out to her and say that you heard her and that it meant something to you. So that's it for us. We'll see you next week at the WhiteFlag Warriors Podcast. In the meantime, hop on the WhiteFlag app. It's free, it's anonymous, and it really does help.